原宣多媒体报道，10月12日太平洋时间上午11点，反对仇恨联盟组织召开网上会议。会议的主题是报告社区的仇恨犯罪以及教育的关键作用。当下，仇恨犯罪和事件急剧增加，与此同时，有关这些犯罪的报告却往往下降，与实际数字相差甚远。移民社区经常面临语言障碍和恐惧，民众担心坏人的报复，使他们无法去报告。这样一来，使得他们受到现有系统的伤害，得不到执法部门的保护。如果想要有效地解决仇恨犯罪，促进准确和公开的报告，就需要创建与执法互动的支持性界面。然而，像这样的教育系统提供了中断内特循环的关键机会。这些情况都意味着导致犯罪报告数据不准确的可能性。参加本次会议的专家有前加州参议院多数党领袖、学校倡导者、选择教育改革者、作家。本次会议的主讲人格洛丽亚·罗梅罗，一个促进匿名举报犯罪的非营利组织洛杉矶地区犯罪热线执行主任娜塔莉沙拉查。
To better focus on the deplorable rise in hate crimes, the principal mandate of the Act Against Hate Alliance is to identify effective solutions to stopping hate crimes. Each segment of this series will bring together stakeholders and thought leaders with a cross-disciplinary focus, along with members of the media, to look at what is happening, to analyze causes, and then with each segment to begin our focus on solutions. Back to you, Bob.
Thank you, Mamie. Our speakers in today's segment each bring enormous experience to this program. Senator Gloria Romero, former Senate Majority Leader and Chair of the Senate Education Committee, and Natalie Salazar, who is the Executive Director of the Los Angeles chapter of Crime Stoppers. This groundbreaking Open Enrollment Act, also known as the Parent Trigger Law, which provides opportunities for school choice for parents of children trapped in chronically academic, underperforming, failing schools. She has successfully started independent public charter schools and is the co-founder of Explore Academy Charter School in Orange County, California.
I actually missed the introduction, so let me go ahead and start with an overview. Basically, I want to congratulate the Alliance. Thank you for the work that you're doing and for the invitation to be with you, and for all of those who have joined in to participate in today's discussion. This is a very timely issue. It's one that hasn't gone away. And I think I just want to pause for a moment and think that it's been 4 decades, 40 years, when I know an issue that impacted me very strongly. When we saw, we heard, we learned about the beating to death of Vincent Chen, a young Asian American of Chinese descent. He was beaten to death in Michigan. And you might recall the year in which he was beaten to death. It was in the early 1980s. There was a severe recession going on in this country. And there was a great deal of, at that time, anti-Japanese sentiment, especially in a declining auto industry. And Michigan, of course, is ground zero for the car industry, car production. So here was a young man. He was actually celebrating the next phase in his life when he was seen. He was called, again, to that notion that all Asians are the same. There was the assumption that he was Japanese American, as if that would matter. But the blame was attributed to him, and he was beaten to death. I think it's one that we would be remiss if we didn't acknowledge 4 decades ago. So fast forward to the present time. We are, as we speak, here in the city of Los Angeles, in the area of LA, witnessing California. And we oftentimes think about California as being, the West Coast, the left coast, so progressive, so understanding, tolerant, etc. And yet we see that nothing can be further from the truth. California is no different than what we are seeing across the country. And I think all of us have been horrified when we've seen images from New York to San Francisco and in California, seeing especially women and especially Asian American women who have been beaten on the streets, beaten in the subways, being shoved to intended deaths. These are just outrageous. It's unbelievable. And it's no wonder that crime has become the top issue, and deservedly so, as this nation now prepares to go out and vote in the midterm elections once again. According to recent reports as well, the anti-Asian American Pacific Islander hate report, which was issued just this year, it has found that only half of Asian Pacific Islanders even feel safe going out of their homes. So imagine that. We come out of a pandemic in which we were told to basically to hunker down. And yet when we come out, if you're Asian, if you're female, oftentimes elderly, sometimes in a wheelchair, you become the prime suspect for being beaten. I mean, that is the ultimate of control when we think about that. So almost half of Asian American Pacific Islanders feel like, I'm not even going to go out of my home. 65% worry about the safety of their family members and particularly their elders in going out of their homes. 32% reported that they worry about their kids' safety at school or on their way to school. And Senator Huff and I were both the chair and the vice chair of the Education Committee. So we know that it becomes very difficult to learn when you're in school if you are worried about your physical security, your absolute physical security. So there's so many issues that we can discuss. I think certain solutions we talked about, certainly education is very important, our schools, our society, et cetera. Enforcement. We always talk about new legislation. I would be one to say that I think we've got plenty of laws on the books, including anti-hate crime legislation. We have to look at enforcement, but that also raises the concern about this is not a time, it really has never been a time to defund the police. Certainly we want accountability, police reforms, responsibility under color of authority so that no community is disenfranchised. But clearly it was complete wacko to have the defund the policing movement take place here in California, in Los Angeles, and across the country. So there's a number of issues. So before I stop, let me just say as well, when we talk about anti-hate legislation, you have to be able to see people as human beings. You cannot just desensitize. And when we don't see people as individuals, as humans, it becomes easy to target them.
While Natalie's teaching experience is not in the traditional public school setting, her hands-on teaching experience and training have brought law enforcement and the community together in innovative, proactive responses to gangs, drugs, and violence. Natalie is currently president of the board of directors for Day One Pasadena, a community-based nonprofit that convenes and coordinates youth and community leadership while providing drug, alcohol, tobacco, and violence prevention services for Altadena, Pasadena, Sierra Madre, as well as the greater San Gabriel Valley. Natalie, welcome. We'll now turn the microphone over to you.
Thank you, Bob, and thank you, Maymay, for the opportunity to address the group today. And also, as I mentioned to Gloria before we started, it's good to see her again. Our paths have crossed several times in our careers. I thought it was interesting when she talked about 4 decades ago. In 2025, I will be having my 50-year high school reunion. I'm a native Pasadena. I'm very proud of that, and so are my parents. But the reason I mention that to you is growing up here, we were one of the first Mexican-American families to be in Pasadena. My grandfather's home was taken as part of eminent domain for the 710 freeway, which obviously will never be going through Pasadena or South Pass or Alhambra in our lifetimes. But I went to school with a number of Japanese Americans. And I remember one of my best friends in high school telling me I couldn't come over to her home because her father, who was the victim of an internment camp, relocated, lost his neighborhood store, again, felt that the Mexicans in the community were part of the cause after they had taken over the store. And one of the things that Gloria mentioned, that we all need to mention this, is that we have to get to know people on a personal basis. And once I kept bugging her dad over and over to talk to me and meet me, we all became great friends, and he got to meet my parents. So growing up in a melting pot in the city of Pasadena that went through quite a bit with busing, I feel lucky to have been exposed to a variety of different cultures and still am with my friendships. I also mention this because 2 days ago, a good elementary school friend of mine had posted on his Facebook page that he felt he was now the latest to be a victim of hate crimes against Asians. And he had just been robbed. He'd been targeted and followed home or on his way home, and was bumped by a car, got out to check the damage. He realizes as he's telling the story a number of things that he probably should have done differently in Monday morning quarterbacking or in hindsight, but ended up being the victim of a robbery. And so again, these things will touch and continue to touch all of us. I want to talk to you about Crime Stoppers, what Crime Stoppers is. As Bob across the country, it first started in 1976. Now, I already told you how old I am. A number of you on here were probably not even born then. And so you don't relate to not having cell phones, not having video footage, relying on getting up to change the channel manually, and being forced. I can see Sunita laughing in the background. So it was a very, very different time then. And the reason that Crime Stoppers started, it was in Albuquerque, New Mexico. There was a young gas station attendant who was murdered brutally in front of a number of witnesses, and no one would come forward. There were no leads. The detective was so frustrated that he finally went to the local service organizations, which we would look at, like Rotary, Kiwanis, Lions, Business and Professional Women's Associations. They went to those groups, and he also went to his local television station. And in those times, it was a local station. We didn't have all of the things that we have today. But he got a reenactment made, and he got the service organizations to put up some money. Now, this is a controversial point here, because a lot of us feel, why should we pay people for doing the right thing? Sometimes we have to have a hook to get people involved. Sometimes that may be the push that encourages somebody to come forward because they may need that type of money. But the crime was finally solved after several weeks and the push in the media of getting the word out there. If you know a crime has been committed, you can do any of the following things. We have a hotline number. It's an 800 number, 1-800-222-TIPS. This is staffed 24/7 by a third-party call center. When you call that 800 number, your phone number does not show up like it would with a 911 call. It is encrypted. You do not give your name. You do not give any identifying information. You submit your tip. You're given a
原宣多媒体报道，谢谢收看。